Strap into your seats and get ready. It's time for the Mortarpod.
Hey everybody, Alex Stephenson from SeemsGoodMagic.com here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mortarpod. Mortarpod is a weekly video podcast where I've constructed a custom magic set based on a movie, TV show, book, from your suggestions, or something personal that I like and wanted to turn into a custom magic set. And then I design a 10 to 20 card set and present the cards to you every week. So what I try to do is evoke the flavor of that movie, book, TV show, whatever the set's based on, and get the characters right and try and basically mechanically align it with Magic the Gathering. Sometimes it makes for some cool balanced cards. Sometimes they're not quite as balanced as I originally intended. Occasional mistake happens. But yes, if you have suggestions on any of them or you think they're overpowered, I'd be happy to listen. I am more concerned with aesthetically sort of evoking the character more so than making like a balanced Magic card. So, although I'd love it to be balanced too, but you can't always just look at a card and know it's balanced. You know what I mean? Regardless, let's jump into this week. We've got a pretty cool one of my top two movies of all time, actually, Braveheart. So, won countless awards. And this is when Mel Gibson was still popular with people. Ever since the multiple incidents he had in the news with his ex-wife and, talking about the anti-Jews talk with Passion of the Christ and the getting the DUI and, calling the female cop names, all that stuff. Basically, everyone hates Mel Gibson, but it's really sad because I loved Braveheart. He did. It's got to be his crowning achievement in his life, in my opinion. Maybe a lot of people argue like Lethal Weapon or something, but no, I really do believe Mel Gibson's best work, hands down, is Braveheart. Just an absolute epic masterpiece of a movie. The soundtrack, everything from the soundtrack, the environment, the accents, the scenes, just such a powerful movie, just an amazingly powerful movie. So I was pretty happy to do this set. Let's jump right into it. We start with William Wallace, played by Mel Gibson himself. He also directed the movie, so he directed and starred in his movie, and it's like a 3-hour movie, so I can only imagine how much work Mel was doing on set for this, starring and having to direct all the other actors at the same time. It sounds really stressful. Okay, so William Wallace. He's 3 colorless, a green and a white, for a 4/4 mythic legendary human warrior. He has the mechanic of this set, which is Rally Morale. And Rally Morale is whenever another creature you control attacks, if it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, put a +1/+1 counter on it and untap it. And then he also has First Strike and Vigilance. So 5 mana, 4/4, First Strike, Vigilance, already very good. And then he has this Rally Morale ability, which is kind of like a Lord effect that I thought would be kind of interesting. A little spin on the typical, Goblin King, Lord of Atlantis Lord effect. Since this affects all creatures, but only once they get the bonus, and then after that, they don't get any more +1/+1 counters and don't untap anymore. But I still think it's definitely a powerful ability. So I wanted William Wallace. He's a very vigilant fighter. He's constantly doing the struggle for the freedom of his people. And I'm pretty sure he has First Strike too, since he's always the battle scenes in Braveheart. If you haven't seen them, I definitely recommend going on YouTube and maybe checking some of them out. What I think worked so well for Braveheart in the battle scenes, where they did these sort of 4 to 5 second snapshots of the battle. So you'd see like a hammer coming down on a dude's head, and then the next scene you'd see a guy getting impaled, and it flashed through like 7 of those, and then would do like an aerial shot again. It was just really cool, really well shot. Loved the way the battle scenes looked. So yes, William Wallace, definitely a good warrior. He had to be. He was the leader of led all these charges. He wasn't even the leader. He just led all these charges. He was sort of like the figurehead. You know what I mean? So next we have Murrin McClanow, and this is his love interest in the movie. And I'm sure you didn't know her name. I certainly didn't know her name. It's tough to decipher some of the names through the really thick accent and their very traditional names. I'm assuming for Scotland, so can be confusing. But Murrin McClanow is 1 white for a 1/2 legendary human creature. She's a rare. When Murrin McClanow dies, if a creature an opponent controls dealt damage to it this turn, you may search your library for a legendary creature card and reveal that card. Shuffle your library, then put that card on top of it. So this is definitely in direct reference to the movie. After Murrin is killed by the Englishmen, punished for basically she was going to get raped, and she fought off her rapist, and then because she assaulted a English officer, she was executed. So unfortunately William Wallace didn't get back in time, but that was what I wanted it to sort of be. Because she dies, it basically is supposed to summon William Wallace to the top of your deck, and then he comes in and obviously gets angry and gets some revenge. Okay. Next, we have a Campbell, veteran warrior. This is just an awesome actor. I loved his performance in this movie. So this guy was actually a friend of William Wallace's dad in the movie, and then he has a son named Hamish, who becomes William Wallace's best friend. But Campbell, veteran warrior, he's 1 and 2 green for a 4/3 legendary human warrior creature. He's a rare. And he has put a -1/-1 counter on Campbell, veteran warrior, regenerate Campbell, veteran warrior. So that was specifically designed in mind with how many times he gets injured in the movie, and he keeps fighting. Because there's a scene, he gets like impaled with an arrow first, and they tear it out and cauterize the wound, and then he's okay. Next, he gets his like hand cut off, and he keeps fighting with like one hand with a morning star, or a flail rather. Just a crazy fighter. So even though he eventually succumbs to battle, he fights super bravely, and I always thought he was an awesome character. Next we have Hamish, son of Campbell. So he's 3, a red and a green for a 6/4 trample human warrior, and he has whenever a creature dealt damage by Hamish, son of Campbell this turn dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Hamish, son of Campbell. So I wanted it to be like as he battles more, he gets more experienced and gets stronger if he survives. It's the Singer Vampire ability originally, but I didn't think it was. Someone mentioned in a comment that they thought it was breaking color pie, so I'd be happy to hear your guys' input on that. I didn't think it, even though it originally was on a black creature, I don't know why a green and red creature wouldn't be able to get bigger from other, your opponent's creatures dying in combat with it. That actually strikes me as something that would be sort of red and green. I could see red, green, and black pretty much all having that ability. I actually don't know if that doesn't strike me as a mechanic that's specific to one color. I don't know why it would be. But the argument was there that you don't see it on red and green, so maybe it's black ability only. I disagree, but the argument was there. Next we have King Edward Longshanks. So this is the main bad guy of the movie. He did an excellent job too, this actor. 2 colorless, a white, and 2 black for a mythic legendary human archon creature. He's a 2/4. He has sacrifice a creature, destroy target creature, activate this ability only once each turn and only during combat. And then he has tap, put a 1/1 black and white human creature token onto the battlefield. And the flavor text is, "I beg your pardon, sire, won't we hit our own troops?" And then he says, "Yes, but we'll hit theirs as well." So it just shows you how ruthless he is to win battles. He doesn't even care about killing his own men. Obviously, Mel Gibson painted the English in a much more negative light than they likely were, and painted the Scottish in a much more struggling. It just makes for a better story. You don't want your bad guys to be, complex, kind of good, kind of bad characters. You want to know right away who's your protagonist, who's your antagonist. So I do think that yes, he painted the English in a much more negative light than they likely were, but it made for a good story. I got to give him that. So that's how I design Edward Longshank's ability. There's that scene from the flavor text is his troops are in close quarters combat with the Scottish, and he tells his archers to fire on them. So willing to kill his own people to kill the enemy as well. Pretty ruthless. Next we have Prince Edward, and this is King Edward's son, who is enters marriage with Princess Isabella, who we'll show you in a little bit, but he's clearly gay, and he's obviously, he knows he has to ascend the throne and have children, but his own sexual proclivities are different than what his dad expects of him. So very interesting dynamic there. And I actually don't know if that was based on any sort of factual truth at all, or if that was just made for an interesting story. But Prince Edward is 2 colorless, a white and a black, for a 1/2 legendary human archon creature. He has tap target creature. That creature's controller loses life equal to that creature's power. And then his flavor text is, I will treat this Wallace like any common thief. Have the local magistrate arrest him and punish him accordingly. So I wanted Prince Edward to sort of have the ability to arrest someone, and then, the punishment is why the controller is losing life equal to that creature's power. This is definitely a strong mechanic, but it's on a 4-mana, multicolor, 1/2 legendary human creature. I'm not convinced it's overpowered. It's certainly powerful, but because it's rare, you wouldn't see it a lot in limited, and I don't know. Maybe it should have had a cost on it. I could see that. I could see it if it had like a white and a black tap target creature. Maybe that's something I could have amended it with to make it a little more, a little less powerful looking. But I certainly don't think it's like the end-all be-all ability. Since he's a 1/2, he's fairly easy to kill. I don't know. I actually like that mechanic. I think that would be cool to see on a creature, as long as it was rare. Okay, next we have Princess Isabella. So this is after Murron is killed. William Wallace eventually falls in love with Princess Isabella, and she is 1 colorless, a white and a blue, for a 1/2 mythic human advisor creature. And she's from France, and she is supposed to be the person that's going to marry, if she hasn't already, marry Prince Edward. I believe she has married Prince Edward already. So Princess Isabella's ability is tap, return target creature card from your graveyard and target creature card in an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their owner's control. Activate this ability only as a sorcery. So it's almost like an exhume, but the cool part is you get to control the creatures. So you get to bring back your opponent's weakest creature and your strongest creature. You don't always get to do that. It depends on what it forces your opponent. You can only use it if your opponent has a creature card in their graveyard and you have a creature card in your graveyard. So it's a little bit specific in when you can use it, but it is a very powerful effect when you can use it. So it would be interesting to see that on a creature as well. And I think that would be a very fun commander card. Next we have Robert the Bruce. Now this is the leader of Scotland currently. His father is a leper, and his father, I believe, was the former leader. And he's getting direction from his father, but his father is basically telling him side with the English and, maintain his reign and legacy and don't risk everything. Despite William Wallace, winning battles left and right, Robert the Bruce eventually goes on to betray William Wallace for an amount of time. and comes back. So if, he actually is a complex character since he's on the good side, then he betrays the good side, then he comes back to the good side. So he sort of flip-flops, and I wanted to evoke that in his card. So Robert the Bruce is a green and a white for a 2/3 legendary human archon creature. He also has the rally morale mechanic. And then he has, whenever another creature you control dies, put a traitor counter on Robert the Bruce. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 2 or more traitor counters on Robert the Bruce, target opponent gains control of it at the beginning of the next end step. So this card is cool because it sort of flip-flops from back and forth. So you have it, you get your rally morale, your guys get in, they get big, they untap, whatever. When some of your other guys die, you put the traitor counters on him, then he goes to your opponent for a turn. Your opponent gets to utilize the rally morale mechanic, and then at the end of your opponent's turn, it goes back to you, and so forth and so forth. So he just keeps flip-flopping back and giving all of, each player's creatures this rally morale, making them bigger. So I thought that would be kind of interesting. I could have made it where, he only switches once, and then when he switches, you remove all the traitor counters, but I actually don't mind him like switching back and forth since that's what he did in the movie. Another comment said that this sort of flipping back and forth is not a green or white thing. That I'm totally oblivious to. I don't think there's a ton of cards that do flip back and forth, and the one that comes to mind is the 1-drop. I forget the name of it. 1-drop 3/2 black creature, I think it is. And I forget how it switches back and forth too. But there is a black creature that does it. And maybe once again, is that black only, the switching back and forth? Perhaps. I just didn't think there was enough of it to really justify where it belonged in the color pie. But I'm willing to listen to anything you want to present to me on that. Any opinion? Next we have Senseless Execution. So this is the scene where Murren has been, sexually assaulted basically, and then assaults the English officer who did that to her, and then she gets senselessly executed. So Senseless Execution is 1 and a black sorcery. It's an uncommon. Destroy target creature. Until your next turn, other creatures that creature's controller controls get +1/+0, and then the flavor text is, you can see the guy doing the execution. He says, "This day's lawlessness is how you repay my leniency. Well, you leave me with little choice." So he's basically just making an example of Murren in front of everybody, and he slits her throat and kills her. So what I like about Senseless Execution is it can hit anything for a relative, good price for limited, but you can also use it on one of your own guys to boost all of your creatures too. So I kind of like Senseless Execution. I think that would be a cool card to see, since you can hit your opponent's creatures. And if they don't have any other creatures, then the drawback to it is completely irrelevant. But it's like it's specifically timed removal that can be defensive or offensive. So I like it. I think there's a lot of diversity to how you can play Senseless Execution. Next we have Freedom Cry. I had to have a card like this since William Wallace has these very powerful, uplifting speeches throughout the movie, right before the battles. So Freedom Cry is 1 colorless, a green and a white. It's an instant, it's an uncommon, and its creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain indestructible until end of turn. And then the flavor text is, "They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom." Remember when he yells that? I love that scene. So then he runs in, and so they'd all be indestructible because, they're all basically operating on full spirit, full charge morale, and they all get bigger too. So I think Freedom Cry would be an awesome, certainly an awesome card, based on sort of like Rootborn defenses and stuff like that made all your creatures indestructible for 3 mana. This is the same sort of thing, except it's uncommon, and it's also a combat, well, kind of a combat trick because it boosts your creatures as well as makes them indestructible. Also protects them from board wipes and stuff like that. So overall, I like it. Freedom Cry. Next, we have Stephen the Irishman, and this is a really awesome character in the movie. He actually comes in later. He's from Ireland, and he comes to help William Wallace, and he actually saves his life, which you'll see in and his mechanics. So Stephen the Irishman is a colorless, a red, and a green for a 2/3 legendary mythic human warrior creature. He has tap. Stephen the Irishman deals 1 damage to up to 2 target creatures and/or players. That's based on the fact that he's got these 2 daggers that he just like throws at people and kills them. I thought that's just so cool. And then he has 2 green. Another target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. And then his flavor text is, "I'm the most wanted man on my island." He's kind of a lunatic a little bit in the movie. He has like a direct communication with God, he believes, and he says some kind of gnarly stuff. He believes that Ireland is his island. He constantly refers to it as that. But yes, he saves William Wallace during a hunting scene, and then that's really why William, makes him part of his elite crew, trusts him so much. So I'm pretty happy with how Stephen turned out. I wanted to show the 2 daggers and show that he protects his friends and stuff like that. I loved Stephen in that movie, though. He was awesome. Just cool, funny lines. And finally, we have Wallace's Blade. So William Wallace wields this enormous claymore. And actually, if you look up the real William Wallace blade, because it's in a museum. And it's a crazy looking sword. Even the real one they have is pretty amazing. But in the movie, it's amazing too. It's just a huge like claymore, 2-handed sword. So I wanted it to be a really like powerful thing. So Wallace's Blade is 4 mana. It's a legendary artifact equipment. It's a mythic rare. Equipped creature has +4/+0 and rally morale. Whenever another creature you control attacks, if it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, put a +1/+1 counter on it and untap it. So it gives the set's mechanic as well as +4/+0. Clearly very powerful. And it equips for 3. So yes, it's a little bit based on Sunforger. Sunforger had the +4/+0 as well. And I just thought the sword should have its own card, since it was a really special, spectacular looking sword in the movie. Okay, that's it for this week's set. I'm going to be doing some more cons drafts until the holiday cube comes out in just a couple more days. So check out SeemsGoodMagic.com for all of your video updates. And we'll see you next week, guys. Thanks for tuning in.